Okay, hi guys, welcome back to another session of tutorials. So on this session we will be covering damage types. So we will start with the types of damage. There are three types of damage. There's piercing damage, such as stabbing, like so. And if you remember earlier in key bindings, I said a pretty handy binding of what to use for stab. So sword, stab, two-handed sword, stab, sort of thing. Okay. The next one, the stabbing is piercing damage. So this is known as piercing damage. So stabbing with a pointed weapon, this is piercing damage. As I said in damage reductions, this is devastating against medium armors. So pointed weapons, even arrows, stabbing against a full medium foe or predominantly medium dressed foe is devastating. Okay, moving on. The next one is slashing. So simple attacks, overhead, left. You know, you got the slashes. Now, slashing, devastating with light armor. Not amazingly effective against someone in full medium. Pretty good against someone in full heavy. Not bad. But predominantly devastating against light armors. And then your final damage is blunt damage. Especially a blunt overhead. Predominantly devastating to people wearing more heavy armor than other forms of armor. Now, if you look at the hammer, it says overhead is a 1.1 bludgeon. So it's 1.1 blunt damage. The overhead with this is brilliant. You do more damage, especially if you hit light. My favourite weapon though is the axe. It's 1.2 overhead. It's longer. It's not as good against heavies, but I adore the axe. It's such a good weapon. Anyway, moving on. Getting distracted. Some damages do extra directional damage, such as overheads. So certain weapons will do more damage through an overhead attack. If you do a fully charged left or a fully charged right, it will not do the same damage as an overhead. The overhead will do more. This is only with certain two-handed weapons, such as the hammer, the axe, the glaive, that kind of thing. And the one-handed mace as well. One-handed weapons are different. They're supposed to be utilised differently. A one-handed mace overhead attack has increased damage to a left and right, but a one-handed sword has increased stab damage than a left and right. So each one is to be utilised against your opponent's armour. So it always pays to have one of at least everything, as we have here. Moving on from the overhead, you have stabbing and bleeding. So with certain weapons, it incurs bleeding damage. So if I was to stab someone with a sword, that would incur bleeding, and also a dagger. So a one-handed sword, a fully charged stab will make them bleed, and it will stack twice. So it will go from 2 bleeding a second to 3 bleeding a second. But the dagger will that stacks a lot. That's devastating. The dagger is meant to bleed people out. So when you stab with the dagger, be ready to bleed them. That's a seriously dirty weapon, but it's fast and it works. So I think that's about it on the damage types, guys. Thank you.